Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope our dear parents and kids are anxiously waiting for our meeting Talk with a Professional today. Just want to remind you, our co-host, Mariam Taysir, and brother Mutlu is basically on vacation. So I'm going to be sitting for them today. My name is Hassan Al-Mozen, and I'm going to be the host for today's Talk with a Professional. Our guest for today is a distinguished guest. Sister Sehrish Siddiqui grew up in Memphis. She graduated from Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. Then she returned to Memphis to practice law and has been at the same law firm ever since. Sister Siddiqui also currently serves as the president of the National Association of Muslim Lawyers, and she's active in the local and the national Muslim community, as well as the greater Memphis community area. Sister Sehrish spends her time with her family, outdoors, in the kitchen, and furthering her knowledge of Islam. Sister Sehrish Siddiqui, welcome to Talk with a Professional.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So if I may start by asking you to take us back in your career journey, back when you were in high school, and tell us what was going into the mind of Sehrish Siddiqui during high school, and she's anxious to finish high school and transition to college. I think this will help our parents, our kids and viewers to think about when they start a career from high school, what should go in their mind?
I'll actually take you a little bit further than that. I will take you back to middle school, because that's kind of when things started running through my mind as far as an interest in law and kind of dedicating my profession in this area. I was seeing that the Muslim community was needing a lot of legal help, and there were no Muslim lawyers. And I did not know any Muslim lawyers personally. I knew a few people who knew Muslim lawyers outside of Memphis, but I didn't know anyone. And I was seeing the Muslim community needing that help, that expertise, and not having access to it. So that's kind of where my mind started really focusing in on this track. It was something that was new to me. It was an area that was new to me. And so I really spent my high school years talking to anyone I could talk to that was in the field, getting their experience, their insights, trying to understand what was going on. I did also connect with those people that were kind of the second connection, so to speak. So the people that I knew who knew people, I would get their phone numbers, I would call them, talk to them about their experiences. And that really kind of got me focused. The more I spoke to them, the more I felt that was something of interest. When I got to college, I did shadow a few attorneys. I did some unpaid internships just as a student, just to get an idea, feel of whether this is something that I could see myself doing. And then I just kind of took off from there.
So basically, from high school, your ambition was to become a lawyer. You sense a need in the Muslim community for people with legal expertise. Now, share with us, if somebody, let's say in high school, and interested in studying law, what is the practical background in college before going to law school? What should they focus on in college to prepare them for law school?
Yeah, I would say coursework wise, there isn't that much more that one needs to do to prepare for law school. When you speak with kind of your respective counselors at universities, they generally have a pre-law or a suggested pre-law track, which would entail courses that kind of help familiarize you, just give you like an overview of the law, just in general. I would say the more important thing to do in college, pursue your subject area of focus, of interest, whatever that is, as your major, but make sure you you shadow attorneys, try to intern, get experience to see what it's like to practice law, and also to have some idea of what area of the law you might be interested in.
So basically, for example, can somebody study biology and then go study law? Or do you, for example, they have to focus on humanities fields?
No, they can. They absolutely can study the sciences or the humanities, and still study law. In fact, even with engineering and science backgrounds, some people are intentional about doing that in their undergraduate career, especially if they are interested in IP or intellectual property type areas of the law.
Right, and that's probably, I'm going to ask you this question towards the end, but to practice, to go to law school, so there's no specific background, right, that students need to earn. Just 4 years degree, bachelor degree, could be in humanities, could be in science.
Correct.
Okay. And then you advise, so as we go through college, you advise is to shadow a lawyer and spend some time in the office of a lawyer?
Yeah, shadow, talk to different lawyers in different fields as well, just to get an idea of what their day-to-day practice is like.
So it looks like somebody who want to study the law need to spend 4 years in college exploring different areas and talking to different lawyers. So give us a few examples of different law practice.
Sure. So there are actually many areas. I practice in corporate law. I have a purely transactional focus. So I don't litigate. I don't go to court. It's more what we call deal work. There's also immigration law, which is a completely different area. There's policy. So we are sometimes familiar with lawyers working on different policies, and that is actually something that lawyers will dedicate their career to, is just focused on policy making. As well as there's litigation. Even within litigation, there's different areas. There's corporate and commercial litigation, where you are representing companies and businesses. There is personal injury, where you're representing people who either have claimed to have an injury. You're representing them, or you're representing the person or the entity that that is claimed to have caused the injury. So there are many different areas. Those are just a few examples.
Okay. In addition, so the profit, non-profit, and you mentioned insurance, right, to accidents and other practices. So during college, kids need to spend due diligence exploring different areas of the law to decide what's the best career for them that match probably their personality and their ambition. So yes, go ahead.
I would just say in undergraduate, shadowing attorneys and speaking with them is really just to become familiar with what is out there in the legal field. A student does not have to decide in undergraduate years what exact area of the law they want to practice. And it's very common for students to really decide that towards the end of their law school years. After they've really gotten that substantive experience in law school. But really the time in undergraduate years, shadowing or interning, is really just to get a feel for what all is out there, just to understand your options.
So basically, until you get into law school, and then you will be exposed to different areas of the law. So how would they prepare themselves? I mean, if somebody interested in studying law, are there specific exams they have to take? What should they focus on?
Yeah, there's a law school entrance exam called the LSAT for short, the law school admissions test. And that is the exam, so to speak, as far as what is required to enter law school specifically. So in addition to just doing your best, doing well in undergraduate, you do want to prepare well and take the LSAT when you're ready law schools will look at the GPA and your LSAT score and determining, your admissions as well as your extracurriculars and whatnot. But the LSAT is the other key item.
Is there also an interview for admission to law school?
I think some law schools have started interviews. I'm not sure if that's necessarily it's not a standard practice, but some law schools do require interviews. It's kind of varied depending on the law school.
Okay. So you advise our viewers to earn a good GPA, to score well on the LSAT, and maybe show on the CV that they have shadowed different lawyers, just to show that they have an interest and a passion for the profession.
Exactly.
Anything else you want to advise our parents and viewers on?
I would just say, generally speaking, kind of keep your end goal in mind. Just keep in your mind why you want to go to law school. Just like any career, you spend a lot of time practicing whatever career you end up choosing. And so make sure it's something you feel passionate about. Make sure it's something you really feel like you want to kind of dedicate your professional life to.
So can you share with us life in Georgetown? George Washington University. How was it like?
Yeah, it was wonderful. So Georgetown's law school is actually away from the main campus. We have there's a separate campus there, and it's next to the Capitol. It's kind of next to all the government buildings. So it was a really nice place to be at going to law school. It was easy to do internships or externships kind of in between classes, being able to go there. The law school itself is one that is what I would describe as fairly open-minded and kind of they're professors that are doing just great work in terms of various policy making and whatnot. So it's just an excellent opportunity even to be exposed to those areas as well.
So being close to DC, you're close to the government and the action in DC. Share with us, during Georgetown University years, did you attend meetings? Did you went to Congress?
Yeah, I would try to take whatever opportunity I could. So there was fairly good access to the Capitol, so I was able to kind of attend events that were open to the public, and there were also kind of Muslim-specific events. We actually had a Jummah at the Capitol, which was kind of cool. So that was something that I would attend from time to time. We had Jummah at our campus as well, which was, of course, the easiest thing to do. We had an opportunity to visit the Supreme Court, just kind of seeing the different legislative bodies that were there was pretty exciting. It was a nice experience as a law student. I also interned because my area that I ended up choosing was corporate law. The Securities and Exchange Commission is kind of the governmental body that oversees the area of law that I practice. And so I was able to intern with them, and that was also walking distance from the law school, which was kind of nice. I was able to just go there between classes. And that was a wonderful experience as well.
Excellent. So what made you decide on becoming a corporate lawyer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I went to law school thinking I was going to be a public interest litigator, which means I would be in the courtroom, completely in the nonprofit sector. And when I got to law school, I started taking these classes on corporations, and I started doing my internships, and I really, really liked the corporate area a lot, to my surprise. And I enjoyed the work. I did well in it, and I had a wonderful opportunity for it. And so I really just kind of made the decision that I would do this in my private practice, so to speak, in my billable practice, and that I would remain very committed to pro bono work as far as the contributions I wanted to make within the Muslim community. And I thought that was just a good position to be in, so that I wouldn't really have to, wouldn't have my livelihood depend on it. So I would be able to help whenever I wanted, however I could, and not necessarily have to wait for a job opportunity to do that.
Okay. So after law school, is there a specific training to take a person into a specific career path? Like in medicine, we have residency, Is there a residency in law, or I mean, how do you become specialized after law school?
Yeah, there's not a formal training after law school. So during law school, in your summers, you spend your summers doing what we call clerkships or internships, and you do them in areas that you think are going to be of interest to you. So when I started gravitating towards corporate law and the private practice, so to speak, my focus was on law firm opportunities in that area. Those tend to be the ones, you know, you secure your place for employment basically about 1 year before graduating from law school in that scenario, because you typically intern and then get a permanent offer at the place you're interning while you're still a law school student. So when you graduate, you know where you're going, and you kind of, typically will pick courses that will help in that area that you ultimately have chosen. If you are public interest focused, in those summers, you'll spend time at whatever public interest type of entity you're interested in working in. But those 2 summers out of those 3 years in law school, your first summer and your second summer, you'll spend doing that. Oftentimes, students will also spend time during the school year to further their experience in that area. And then right after graduation, you will take the bar exam, which is kind of your final major exam. And that is what would give you the license to practice. You really cannot practice on your own until you take that bar exam in the state that you want to practice in. So you do that, and then you start practicing, after that. And really, your first few years, there's just a very big learning curve where you're shadowing attorneys and working under the supervision of attorneys that are just more senior to you in that area and that are teaching you that particular area of focus.
So the bar exam is specific for every state. There's no general exam that students need to take?
No, the bar exam is specific to the state. There's actually two parts to the bar exam. So there is the part that is specific to every state. So there's that, and then there's the second, what we call the BPRE. It's the ethics portion, the ethics exam, so to speak. That second portion is a common component amongst various states.
Okay. Now, do lawyers need to score specific score to pass? How does it work?
Yeah, the bar exam is interesting. So depending on the state, you either pass or you fail the exam. So, and depending on the state, they might publish what the actual score is, or they might just tell you if you pass or failed. Tennessee, unless something has changed, just tells you if you pass or failed. And it's I'm pretty sure most states do it this way, but just generally speaking, what they'll do is after you take the bar exam, it takes several months for them to review it and to grade it, so to speak. And they just post names publicly as far as who has passed. And that's how you find out. You just keep checking the website the day they say they'll post it. And that's how you find out whether you passed or failed. And so they generally offer it twice a year, in the fall and in the winter. There are bar preparation courses that you take leading up to the bar exam. Assuming you prepare well and do what you're supposed to do, you should be fine. But some people don't pass the first time, and they'll take it again. Or if they end up changing states, they'll have to take it in that state. Some states offer like an arrangement where if you practice a certain number of years in one state, they can waive the requirement of the bar exam in their state if you end up moving there. And that way you don't have to take an exam again before you get the license to practice there.
Interesting. Is there a specific duration for the exam? Is it valid for certain years, or it's for life?
It is, you only have to take it once if you're only practicing in that state, but on an annual basis, you have to take the continuing legal education credits and fulfill those to maintain your license. And that also includes kind of the substantive portion, like the legal, like on the law. And there's also kind of the ethics portion with respect to the law. There's kind of requirements in both. And as long as you complete those every year, then you maintain your license. And you pay your fees, of course. You have to pay your annual fees. So
interesting. So once you take the exam, you pass, and then you have to maintain or do continuing education to maintain the license.
exactly.
And continuing education is you have to attend certain conferences, or how does that work?
Yeah, you attend just certain courses, conferences. During the pandemic, the state of Tennessee allowed kind of all online, just because in-person gatherings were so difficult to do during the COVID pandemic. But typically there's a portion that is considered in-person credit, and there's a portion you can take kind of virtually.
Okay, so this is basically done on an annual basis. You just have to show that you have attended, right? Those conferences and those meetings.
Yeah, you report them. So, you attend the entity hosting that course applies ahead of time for credit from that state, and will let you know in advance that you can get CLE credit for XYZ states, but we don't have approval from XYZ states. And so once you get it, then you apply for credit and you get it posted to your account.
Interesting. Very good. Very good. So my question now, I want to go back and revisit the specialization area. You mentioned students need to take internships during the summer. They need to do internship in a specialized area, right? And that will prepare them for the final year when they begin to explore employment with different firms, law firms. So how would, when a firm want to pick a lawyer, a fresh lawyer, do they want to see a series of internships, specialized internships? Is that what make a match, employment match?
Yeah, they will look at your kind of your experience in those courses. The traditional or kind of the ideal path is where you intern, that is where you get your permanent job offer. So they also are able to kind of work with you and see what's kind of how you work during those 2-3 months that you are interning with them before they actually make you the offer for permanent employment. And then in the scenario where a law student is looking for employment after graduation, law schools will look at their career, their law school career, kind of their grades, their transcripts, what they took, and what experience they have in making that decision.
So basically, most law firms, they advertise for internships, right? That's how they recruit the talent for their future employment.
Correct. Yeah, that it's a very deeply ingrained practice in the law firm world. It's a very standard practice and a lot of time and money, quite frankly, is spent in recruiting that talent through the intern route. Just because it's such a good opportunity for both the law student and the law firm to spend time 2-3 months before deciding to have a permanent place there.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the corporate world. I mean, what are different areas of practice within your field?
Yeah, there are actually a ton of areas even in my field. So, like I said, I do corporate work, and my particular specialty on the billable side is what we call capital raising and corporate governance for public companies. And so that really translates into helping companies that are public or that want to go public, that want to trade on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, what have you, comply with all the regulations that attach to being a publicly traded company. It's a very highly regulated area. And so lawyers are deeply involved when a company wants to raise money from the public. because that's something the government, kind of stresses a lot of disclosure obligations, just a lot of different things that kind of go into that. And then the corporate governance, just how they govern themselves as a corporation. There are many more requirements that attach to a company that is public, that does trade on an exchange like that, that takes money from the public to use in its own company. So that's the area that I work on. But there are so many more fields. So I have many colleagues that don't do anything with respect to capital raising, but are still corporate attorneys that do transactional work. Down the hallway from me, they do M&A, mergers and acquisitions work, where you're taking two entities and combining them or selling something off. Like that's all they do night and day. There are others that work particular fields of corporate. So we have a very large healthcare practice for corporate, because healthcare itself is a separate area of the law. It's highly regulated, but the corporate work within healthcare is a separate area of the law. So there's a lot of specializations within the area itself.
That's very fascinating. So let's say a young entrepreneur starts an LLC and they want to raise funds. When do they get to that stage where you can help them to go public?
Yeah, generally, by the time they want to go public, they have a history already, an operating history, a fairly successful one, where it's gotten so big, so to speak, they want to go public. So I'm less involved at the initial stages, more involved in subsequent stages when a company has been operating for a while. I will say, kind of in addition to your question for specializations, there are attorneys that are more general practitioners, so to speak. So they do general corporate work, contracts, forming an LLC or a corporation, just kind of more general transactions. So that's also a separate area. And I would touch on, for my pro bono practice, which is very important to me, I do a lot of nonprofit work, just helping with corporate governance in the nonprofit space. And, mashallah, our Muslim community, and every community is in need of that. But I think just given the shortage of Muslim attorneys, there's just a lot of need within our own Muslim community, locally and nationally, with respect to legal work in that area. So that's something that I do as well.
So in your mind, why we're not attracting a lot of kids to law? Why many kids want to be within maybe the medical field, maybe engineering, but not into law? What are the barriers in your mind?
Yeah, well, I think it's our own community, right? We tend to gravitate, or maybe we sometimes encourage our kids to go for the more traditional paths because that's what we're familiar with. That's what we know. That's kind of what our social circle is composed of. It's just easier to have access to that knowledge and that experience. But more and more, I think the legal community is growing within the Muslim community. I can say even within NAML, or the National Association of Muslim Lawyers, my predecessors, those that were before me in leadership, tell me how small our organization was, and it's grown so much over the years, just because the Muslim community has grown in this area. But I will say, generally speaking, the legal practice itself is a less diverse field as compared to engineering and the medical fields. And it's something that everyone acknowledges needs to be more diversified, not just within the Muslim community, but generally just across ethnicities and religions.
Interesting. So in the Muslim community, what do you think the areas that within the law that we want to encourage kids and college kids to maybe pay attention to?
I would say all areas, to be honest. I think there's benefit for the community and for the legal profession for Muslims to be involved in various areas of the law. I think the most important thing is for interest to match area. So I wouldn't go into something that you don't really like because you won't enjoy doing it. And so to be able to do what you like is a blessing. And I think it will help you do better and enjoy what you're doing, and it'll help you serve better.
Nice. Excellent. So how many years you've been practicing the law since law school?
Yeah. It's been almost 10 years, inshallah. It'll be coming soon. Yeah. Inshallah. Yeah.
So when a fresh lawyer enters into practice, I mean, do they have a specific designation or a title?
Yeah, when they enter the law, so when they're waiting for the results to come back from the bar exam, they're not technically licensed, and so they're still considered a law clerk. Once they're licensed, they, at least within the law firm of the private practice, they're considered an associate. And then after they practice a certain number of years and are able to kind of develop that independence as far as practicing law themselves and developing kind of those relationships and that work, they have the opportunity to become what we call partner or an owner in that law firm. So that's kind of the traditional track within the law firm space. And then within the nonprofit space, it's different, just depending on the organization that you're working with. But you will be considered an attorney versus a clerk once you're licensed. So even after you take the bar exam, those 2 or 3 months where you're waiting for results to come back and you start working, they will refer to you as a clerk because you can't technically be considered, a licensed attorney at that time. So you have to work under someone.
I see. Now, if somebody, let's say, interested in becoming a judge, what's the pathway to become a judge?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are different pathways. So there are many attorneys that will practice law in the law firm space and then become judges. But one great experience to do after law school or even during law school is to clerk for a judge, to intern for a judge. And, some people enjoy that work so much, they actually make it a career after law school to be the clerk of a judge, because judges have clerks, law clerks, what they call them, and those are attorneys working for them, and that is definitely the best way to really see what goes on inside the world of the chamber, so to speak. And then also to kind of get that experience to become a judge. And judges are both appointed positions, they're elected positions. It just depends which seat there's, depends which court and which seat. Is it a federal one or a local one? They're just different ways to get that seat accordingly. And we're seeing, alhamdulillah, more and more Muslim attorneys occupy judge positions as well, which has been wonderful.
Yes, I agree. Can you maybe share some light on the federal system and being a circuit judge, and what are the different positions within the federal system?
Yeah, so there's within the federal system, you have the circuit, the district, and then you have, Supreme Court is kind of the end all be all, and we're well aware of kind of how highly publicized those appointments can be. Those are presidential appointments. They also have various, you're not divided by state in that instance. There are different divisions, so to speak. How those are fulfilled on the federal side, I'm trying to think kind of which way to go. So a lot of them are actually technically presidential nominations. And you might have heard recently a lot of the appointments or the nominations that President Biden has been making to fill open positions. There's a lot of work that goes kind of before that nomination is made, right? So there's a lot of familiarity with the candidate before President Biden actually kind of nominates someone. But after that, the Congress actually has to confirm. There's usually a dedicated committee the Judiciary Committee that would kind of help funnel those selections and ask questions and interview the candidate. There was one confirmation of the first what we call kind of the appointed judge, so to speak, just a few months ago, who we know openly identifies as Muslim, not necessarily the first Muslim, but at least the one that we know openly identifies as Muslim.
Right. So basically within the federal system, the circuit, is it cover a geographic area of the US? Is that how the circuits work?
Yeah, there are various districts, so to speak, within the federal system, and they cover different areas. So yes, so it's very different than your local court system.
Right. So the local court system basically returns to the state, and the governor, I'm assuming, of the state appoints the different judges within the state.
There are some positions that are appointed. There are some that are elected. So, oftentimes if you go to vote, you'll see options to vote for judges as well. So there are various positions that are actually elected that we actually vote for as well.
Interesting. So we spoke about judges, we spoke about corporate lawyers. Intellectual properties. Can you maybe talk a little bit about intellectual properties? How would a lawyer become a patent lawyer?
Yeah, there's a separate bar exam. There's a patent law. There's a separate bar exam for that. And there's also more requirements with respect to the particular area that you would be working in. So if you are, for example, kind of working in the sciences, there's a certain number of hours coursework that you would actually need for familiarity within that subject. Similarly, kind of within, a lot of engineers will go into that area for that reason as well, but there's a certain number of hours depending on what area they end up going in and picking. They will actually have to fulfill a certain number of hours with respect to the more technical side. And they take that patent bar exam all prior to practicing patent law independently.
So if somebody is interested in working in academia, let's say finished law school and they want to become a faculty in academia and law, how would they need a PhD? How would they pursue academic career?
Yeah, so there is I guess you would say the PhD equivalent of within the legal field is called an SJD. And you don't need it necessarily to go into the academic career, depending on what you want to do. So a lot of law school professors are actually part-time, where they're maintaining a practice of some sort in teaching law school. But if you're truly kind of committed to kind of dedicating yourself to an academic law career, then yes, that is an entirely separate path. That would entail a lot of focus, a lot of publications, a lot of focus in a particular area, kind of prior to really becoming that, securing that full-time law professor position.
Right. So the practice of law, basically, I'm assuming the person need to read the laws and be familiar with the specialized laws. For example, in your area, I mean, what's your daily read to help companies?
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear. What's my daily what?
Daily read. I mean, what do you read typically to help companies?
Yeah. I read a lot.
I know, I bet you.
Let's see, what all do I read? So, I think one thing is being familiar with the law that you're helping the company with. The other part is being familiar with the company to kind of advise how they can best comply with the law. So I would say it's kind of an equal amount of both, being very familiar with the company as well as that respective area of the law. I think in addition to that, there are oftentimes there's not a black and white answer, so to speak. And so being familiar with kind of what others are doing with respect to that particular rule or regulation, kind of what we call market practice or what the trend is with respect to that also helps. So there's kind of a couple of different things that I read up on or I keep current on.
So for public companies, are they governed by federal laws?
Correct.
And state laws?
They're governed by state laws to the extent they, like where they're incorporated, they have to, comply with the, with those, if they're with respect to kind of local transactions, kind of, they have to keep in mind employment laws, and that's a separate area of the law, by the way. Employment benefits, that's a separate area of the law. But the actual kind of what I do is more or less purely federal law.
Right, adhering to the Security and Exchange Commission.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Very nice, interesting. So you've been practicing 10 years. I mean, how do you see, what's the future for Sehrish Siddiqui? How do you see yourself?
That's a good question. Allah knows best. Yeah, I definitely, I enjoy what I do, and I also love the pro bono work because that's very important to me. And so I definitely see myself continuing down that path for sure, because that's really what motivated me to go into law in the first place, and that's something that's very close to my heart.
Yeah. So are you maybe want to stay within the same, your practice, or are you looking maybe to have your own office? Private office. How would this work in the future?
I'm happy where I'm at. So I don't have plans of opening my own office. Yeah. I know people that have. And so I think everyone, there's, depends on what you want out of your law practice and what you do. So my particular practice area in terms of my billable space is not something that's it's very difficult to do alone. You really need a team of lawyers to help. One person can't really do everything. But there are other areas where you can very easily just open your own practice and help with the other areas of the law. Family law is a very common area for that. Estate planning, wills and whatnot. That's also a common area as well to do.
So in the final minutes of talk with a professional, what advice do you have for high school kids, for college kids who are really passionate about becoming a lawyer? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to, talk, shadow, do what you can just to learn more about how the law works, kind of what you would be doing as a lawyer, just to have a good feel, and keep reminding yourself kind of why you are so passionate about the law. What do you want to do? And then make sure you try to choose an area or a path that will help you get to that goal, because it's very easy to get sidetracked by various other opportunities that kind of come your way. And they might be wonderful, but at the end of the day, you should stay true to what motivated you, to go to law school, what you really feel passionate about, and try to find opportunities in those areas.
Great. Sister Sehrish Siddiqui, this has been a pleasure having you on Talk with a Professional.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Sister Sehrish Siddiqui. It has been a pleasure for us hosting her today on Talk with a Professional. So until the next time, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next month with a different guest. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.